Lovely people, welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. I'm Sammy, and I'm a writer who likes to learn about writing through reading and share what I learn with you. So this week I want to talk to you about One Last Stop, which has been pretty popular off and on the Book Talk, Bookstagram scene because it's by the same author as Red, White, and Royal Blue, which has been a big deal. And I don't really have any interest in reading that one, but I was more able to see myself in these characters, so I read One Last Stop. Now, what I will say is that I did not know anything about this book besides that it was about two girls who fall in love on a subway. Like, it's way more than that. It's like a contemporary love story. It's LGBTQ. It's kind of sci-fi. It's so many more things than just that like simple statement that I just made, that I was on a wild ride the whole way through, and it was great. So before I continue on to my thoughts, I just want to ask you, if you enjoy this video, to hit that like button. If there's anything that you agree with, if there's anything you disagree with, hit that like button so that we can get more of a dialogue going on and show YouTube that more people may be interested in this video as well. So let's talk about my thoughts then. There are a lot of characters, and there's a very narrow path that you need to walk when there's a lot of characters, and this book stays on that path so perfectly, like you would think it's a mile wide. By that, I mean there are all of these characters, but every single one of them is necessary to the story. Every single person that comes into contact with this plot helps continue the story and helps motivate August through her internal conflict and keeps all of that going. So it's really well done and really well balanced that we're able to keep track of who these characters are, what they're bringing to the story, and what kind of impact they have on the progression of August and Jane's relationship and their conundrum. I also think it's really interesting how they gave advice in this book. Every character had something that was going on, and it wasn't necessarily just August's story. Like, it was August's story. August is obviously our main character, and she's got all of the things that interweave all of these other people's stories together. But while these side plots were going on with the other characters' internal problems, we get to see those other characters giving August advice through their actions and how she processes that, where it's able to have the other characters influence August through their actions, rather than being like, hey, August, you need to handle this thing, and like telling her. It's kind of a real world balance of showing versus telling, and it's done really, really well. I also think the development of August's character is a really unique and specific trope to be putting into this story, because she's got this crazy history where her mom decided that she wanted a kid, and she spent her whole life trying to solve her uncle's disappearance, and her mom kind of taught her how to be a detective more than she taught her how to be a normal person. And all of that backstory really drives August to sort of dive into Jane's situation, along with August's attraction to Jane. Her need to solve the case makes it an interesting dynamic that probably would not have come if August was not who August is. So what do I think could be improved about this story, about how this book was written? I normally don't have a preference between first person or third person books. It doesn't typically make a difference to me as I'm reading. It's just something that I'm like, oh, it's in first person, oh, it's in third person. It's not, I don't care one way or the other, but I do think this book would have been better in first person, because it was such a close narrative, such a close third person, that we were right here with August the whole time. We never left August's side, and the way the language was written made me forget that it was written in third person sometimes, because it felt like it was in first person, and then we would get those she or August or other third person pronouns, and I was like, wait, oh, right, it's in third person. And that kind of took me out of the story a bit, because it really wouldn't change much about the story if it was written in first person. We didn't get any other insights that wouldn't have come from August's direct thought process. So I don't see why it wasn't written in first person. Like, there's nothing wrong with writing it in third person. It was just the whole time that I kept getting pulled out of the narration because it was written in third person, and I'd forget because it was such a close third person that it may as well have been first person. Something else that is entirely a personal preference in terms of improvements is that I did not like the ending, and I wish it was the exact opposite of what happened. And that's what I'll say about that, because I think it would have been better for me if it was the opposite. And I would have liked to see how the opposite outcome would have been navigated more so than what actually happened. Just because I would think that was more interesting, not because it would make it better in general, but it would make it better for me. So that one is entirely personal and not something that necessarily needs to be done in, like, if you're writing a similar story, it's not something that you would need to do unless your target audience is me. If your target audience is me, myself, and I, then you should do the opposite. But that's it. That's all I'm going to say on that, because if I keep talking, I'm going to say something and then everybody's going to know what the ending is. So what can we learn from this story? I think this is a great example of a lot of things, especially characters, and tying together multiple characters and having all of those characters have an impact on the story, having them all have their own individual importance, having a large group of people who are all sort of intertwined in the same way, but they all have different strengths and different things to offer, and they all have their own side story. They're all individual people. It's a really great example of that. And tied to all of those characters being their own individuals, it's also a great example of multiple connected storylines, where there are a lot of different things that are happening simultaneously. While we're following our main character, we've got all of those, like, clear and consistent growing other plots that if we were to jump into another character's perspective and tell the same timeline of events, we would have a totally different story, because they're doing something different and their motivations are different, and how August impacts their lives is going to be different than how they are impacting August's life. As I'm filming this, I'm discovering how difficult it is to say August's, because August is a noun that's also a name, and it's really hard to say out loud as a possessive. Wow. Okay. I also think this is a great example of world building on a smaller scale. It's got so many different aspects of world building that are put into it because of how many different genres it's touching. Because we've got, like, historical fiction in here, we've got sci-fi, we've got contemporary. The way all of those genres impact the world building makes it something very different. And that's really interesting to see how all of those things tie together and how they make the story happen. I think even the case of August's uncle, his missing case, is a bit of world building as well. So, like, a crime novel as well. It's just really, really great to see all of those examples of that coming together into this one hodgepodge of a book that is so much more than what you think it is. I think One Last Stop was a really great book. I gave it 4 stars because I didn't like the ending, but it probably would have been 5 if I was just not so selfish. It's a great example of a lot of things, and it's nice to normalize more LGBTQ media and make it more mainstream as we're starting to be able to have that as part of everyday life and have people who are in the LGBTQ community be represented in mainstream media in a way that's not like, oh, hey, here's the story about a boy and a girl who fall in love, and both of them have a friend who's gay who may or may not get killed off. We don't know. And it's just really nice to see common tropes being placed on LGBTQ characters rather than LGBTQ characters being a common trope, if you know what I mean. So that is all I've got for you today. If you have read One Last Stop, let me know what your thoughts were down below. I'd love to have a book chat with you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It'll really help me out. And if you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and I will see you on Tuesday for a Writing Tip Tuesday and back again on Saturday for another Story Study Saturday.